Salutations, comrades. It is meet and right to do homage to Comrade Mugabe, who is currently indisposed. So let us examine his record of struggling indefatigably for the upliftment of his folk. And let's not forget how he battled so valiantly against the Smith fascist junta. Indeed, the British, they supported Ian Smith to the hilt. And that's why Mrs. Mugabe was given asylum in the United Kingdom in the 70s, supported by a Labour and a Conservative peer. And it's quite true that Her Britannic Majesty's government was 100% behind the UDI, which is why they declared it illegal. And yes, the UK was always arming Smith, which is why Smith later published a book entitled The Great Betrayal, where he lamented rancorously the fact that the UK didn't give him any backing. And indeed, he wrote The Bitter Harvest, where he laments the fact that the United Kingdom would not come to his aid, and in fact obliged him to come to terms with African nationalism to parley with Mugabe in the end. And we know that Robert Mugabe was always heroic, including when he was released from prison after 10 years, and he went to Switzerland and later Mozambique, and he was obviously abysmally treated in prison, ghastly conditions, so much so that they forced him to do several degrees through the University of London. The fact he was awarded the degrees proves yet again how anti-black the British are. And Mugabe, he was courageous in going to combat missions, many times putting himself in harm's way instead of encouraging naive teenagers to go and get killed for him. So it's good to know that Mugabe, when he was battling, was always supported by true democracies, by countries that were not one-party states, were not totalitarian, did not have any ludicrous cult of the personality, where human rights were fully respected, where there was a completely free media, independent judiciary, where there were no political prisoners, and where there were no legal catch-alls and as an excuse to put dissidents in prison, and when torture was never ever used, and when people were not indoctrinated and brainwashed with jaded Marxist slogans. It's absolutely appropriate that the president should scapegoat a handful of elderly whites as though they are wrecking the country and not him, and it shows his true leadership qualities that he fails to take responsibility for mismanagement of the country. And it's fabulous that he never ever race baits, the kind of thing that he would accuse his enemies of doing. You can get a measure of the man by the way Mugabe says that he's Hitler tenfold, and wow, what a boast. He's not braggart or anything. You know, if a man says he's Hitler tenfold, you know he must be moral. So Robert Mugabe most certainly hasn't lost his marbles, and it irks me when people say that he has lost his mental capacity. His cognitive faculties are functioning brilliantly. He is entirely lucid. He's not at all forgetful, nor does he fall asleep in international fora and embarrass the country. So he is a true Marxist. That's all about sharing property, no private property, no free enterprise, and not just giving away assets to his cronies. Quite right, when he sequestrated land from the white farmers, the commercial farmers, and the land was handed over not just to his henchmen, but to ordinary poor farmers in the countryside. I'm glad to know that the president, he's in the best of sorts. He's as healthy as an Olympic athlete, so Heroes Acre will have to wait for him another century. And he's absolutely right to worship a rising sun, not a setting sun, to see Zimbabwe's futures with the People's Republic of China. One thing I like about our Confucian cousins is there will be no impertinent questions from them about 20,000 civilians murdered in Matabeleland. I mean, what could be less important? Just shrug it off. Whoops-a-daisy, who cares? You know, it's just about business. What are human rights when the mighty dollar is there to be earned? because anyway, it's a complete hoax. Nobody was killed in Matabele land. And by the way, those people who got killed absolutely deserved it. But the whole thing was a complete fabrication. It was yet more fraud by the imperialist powers. All those dead bodies, well, they were just fake ones. And these people died of lead poisoning, or they committed suicide by shooting themselves several times in the stomach. So this never, ever happened, and the government was right to do it. It never happened, as the defense ministers, two of them, subsequently said it happened, and indeed President Mugabe said it happened, but that doesn't in any way undermine the previous denials. So it was entirely an internal matter, and it's nobody else's business. How dare any other country poke their nose into the internal affairs of Zimbabwe? But by the way, apartheid definitely was the world's business, and we're absolutely right to be concerned about that and demand that racist oppression comes to an end. But what I really admire about the president is the fact that he's so well spoken, his mannerisms, his very broad lexis, even his dress sense. He's a true British gentleman. One might even say he's the stage Englishman, which shows that imperialism's had no positive legacies whatsoever. So I'm glad that he never ever attempted voter suppression by trying to keep would-be MDC voters off the rolls. And how curious it is that a socialist should have most of the poor people voting for the other party. And the people who backed him up, they're not the payroll vote or anything. It's not just the army, the CIO, and a few government officials who see which side their bread is buttered on. And they're not backing him out of sole self-interest or anything. They're doing it for the most high-minded and disinterested reasons, in consonance with true socialist principles. It's entirely altruistic. And by the way, those smart sanctions, which only target a handful of the supreme leaders, those are what are responsible for the hardship. It's not kleptocracy. It's not the elite creaming off wealth from most people, and it's absolutely not misrule. It's all the British fault, because they're the Antichrist, every single one of them, and they still have total control of Zimbabwe 37 years after independence. Well, I wish we had a leader like President Mugabe in my country. He would really sort things out. And the whole thing, actually, what's going wrong is there's a British conspiracy, and they are plotting to sodomize Zimbabwean manhood. That's it. It's this gay plot, and that's proved 100%. There's not a shadow of a doubt about that. They're trying to corrupt Zimbabwean men and lead them into carnal lust and unnatural actions. So it's absolutely right that the president should stand foursquare against such disgusting immorality, and he would never resort to some really low tactic like queer bashing. Well, I'm pleased to know that President Mugabe is going to live another 1,000 years.